So let's give a virtual round of applause as we introduce our speaker number two, architect Inigo Tiosejo III. So a bit of a background for architect Inigo Tiosejo III. He is a licensed architect and instructor who graduated from the Del Salle College of St. Fernil and after undergoing apprenticeship under architect Christopher, passed the architecture licensure exam on January 2020. Architect Inigo is the principal architect of 83 Architecture Design and specializes in residential design and commercial interiors. He is also the director for Heritage Conservation in Del Salle University Des Marinas. He utilizes Revit, 3ds Max, and V-Ray and post-process these renders with Adobe Photoshop. Now let's introduce the next part of the presentation with Mr. Nigo. You may now take the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. You guys can hear me?
Yes,
Clear?
sir. We can hear you.
All right. Hi. So it's nice to see you all, and thank you, Saga, for inviting me. And so for those who know me, hi to my class, ArcDis 5, Dar 6. So hello, thank you for watching. Um, and I'm sure a lot of you don't know, but I actually did my apprenticeship with Sir Chris. So I'm excited to work with him on this one today. So and you guys will see some of the works that I've done with Sir Chris, lalo na the competition works. So yeah, let's begin. You guys can see my screen. All clear, man.
Yes, sir.
All right. So today I'll be teaching Photoshop post process. Pero for those who don't use Photoshop, since I know there's a lot who use like Canva or other software, so don't worry. My job here naman is to teach the basics and the important concepts of how to post process or how to make the general finishing touches once you have a completed render. So to start, there are three main concepts I want you guys to know, which is one is composition, then the next is the mood and temperature, and lastly are the details. So the two case studies I'm going to show are these two design competition projects I've worked with Sir Chris. So the first one is the Martial Law Memorial Design Competition, and the other is a concert hall design competition. So, two different designs, completely different intentions. So here I'd like to show you the differences on how they create a different, how they tell a different story. And that's the thing with post process and making perspectives in general. It's about telling the story. It's about about not needing to say much anymore after looking at just one image. So generally, the goal is to come up with like five good perspectives when you present your arc this. And that's it. The jury won't even ask you questions anymore because your perspectives already said everything from materials down to the activities and the intent it's for. So yeah, let's begin. So the first one I want to discuss is composition. So look at this first perspective here. Let's break down each element. So you can see here the people, the structure, the plants, the Philippine flag, and generally this concrete material all around. So how I did the composition of this. So as mentioned earlier by Sir Chris, he said something about rule of thirds. So yeah, it's good to start first from the when you create the render first. Yeah, it's nice to position everything in a rule of thirds. So as you can see here, let's start muna with this concrete layer. So in this design, the concrete part would be the memorial part where you can see the plaques of the victims. And then on top is the actual museum. So if you notice how the perspective was composed, one third, meaning this red line, one third of it is generally the memorial. So your eyes are already drawn to it. And then two-thirds of it is the actual structure with the plants. And then what else do we have here? What's the main focus of this, the subject? It's actually these two people here. and then and then as because of the composition of the elements, it draws you to the center, just like how every perspective is. So what's in the very middle? It's the Philippine flag. So the question here is, where's the architecture in all this? Actually, the trick here is to make an interesting perspective that tells a story. The architecture should actually be the background, and it should be just there. Because remember, as architects, we don't really design buildings for buildings. We design the buildings for the people. So therefore, the story you should be telling is what activities or what emotions your building provides for the people. So therefore, the subject should actually be the people. And well, in my case, I made the Philippine flag the center because it's a memorial for our country. So yun, that's the first demonstration of showing on how to do composition. Next image. This one naman is the sequence. I want to show here how I composed it in terms of like visual hierarchy, starting with the first subject, leading to the next. So it's the person looking at the memorial wall. And then to the very center, the very back, that's the actual building itself. So notice in this composition, look how it draws your eyes left to right to center. So that's generally how the story goes. It's already telling a story just by looking at it. And then notice the dark and light spaces. The dark spaces are all around. They're on the, let's say, the outer thirds of the image. And then the general one third is all bright. So it draws all your eyes to the middle. So if you can see, the architecture is still in the background, but all the activity tells the story of what the architecture is meant to be doing. So that's another example of doing composition. And then the next one, this one is the concert hall design competition we did. One of my most favorite renders of all time. So here naman, let's break this image down naman in terms of composition. So you can see here, now what's the real focus of this? This is a amphitheater. So I made sure it's the drummer and the singer as the main focus because generally that's where everyone's attention, like the audience should focus on. So that's where I put them on the rule of thirds. And then look at the positioning of the amphitheater itself. It takes up one third of the space, and then all the rest of the architecture is taking up the two thirds. So generally, it creates this visual hierarchy where you understand the story it's trying to give. It's trying to tell you it's in a very festive mood. Tsaka compare also like the composition of the people. This has way more people than the memorial kasi nga, we're trying to convey a festive atmosphere. The previous ones, it's solemn, it's peaceful, less people. It shouldn't feel crowded. So those are the tricks. It's kind of exaggerated, but yeah, in the end, the point is you have to tell the story. So the next concept I'm trying to demonstrate here is mood and temperature. So let's compare these two perspectives earlier. These are the original images fresh from the render. By the way, the software I used here is 3D Max with V-Ray. Kaya it looks completely different from Enscape. So the thing with 3D Max V-Ray is it's a much more realistic, but it takes much longer. So this is where your discard comes in. You have to parang out choose the balance between realism and yung speed. Pero that's why I'm teaching post-process because it generally negates let's say Enscape has slightly more cartoonish quality. The post-process makes it more realistic. So this post-process not only is a tool used to tell a story, but it's also a tool to be efficient. So in a way na, example, your PC can't handle so many assets all at once. Use the post-process to fill in those assets. Pero now we're talking about mood and temperature here. Look at the difference between these two. You want a solemn, peaceful, or let's say it's a sad on the sad side. Then let's use a tone that's very desaturated on the grays, medyo bluish, and then compare it with on the festive one, the concert hall. Very exciting, high energy atmosphere. on the reddish, yellows more on the warm colors kasi nga you want to show that summer vibe na something exciting, uh, a lot of energy going on. So you can see just the temperature of the colors, which I'll show you later how to do. Doon pa lang you already know na um, the mood setting it's trying to convey. So that lessens the stuff you need to talk about. Kasi nga, the picture already explains it all. Then, sorry. Then let's look at this one naman. Same concert hall design competition, pero one is in a daytime in summer setting and the other is in a winter setting. So you can see the differences of yellows and the blues. It already conveys the emotions that we were trying to show or to give the clients or the in this case the judges. Even down to the flowers you see that it matters. You really have to. It's in the details that sets the tone, the colors. Then the last one would be details. So look at the difference between without post process and with post process. The one without post process looks so flat. So if you look at it, parang okay, yeah, I understand the building, I understand, but it doesn't tell me exactly what you're supposed to be doing in it, and that's the point of why we design. So let's break down that image and see what are these details that we can add in post process. So let's start with the sky. So as demonstrated by Sir Chris earlier, the sky alone already sets the entire mood. So usually I do my renders on pa sunset, and that's because it has a combination of daylight and a combination of the artificial lights. So you can see here I have spotlights, I have the string lights here, those tiny string lights, and then those tiny lights on the benches, and then there's the street light, the lamps. So I really like using lights. It really sets a mood. It lighting plays a major role. So I'm also gonna demonstrate it later how to do realistic lighting. Like so, compare this with the lights off and with the lights on. It's completely different. And then the other is like example, these spaces here. These are supposed to be cafes. So you can see I put some random action going at the back, so it looks like there's more. Compare it again with this one. If we just use a regular light, it looks flat. And then the human entourage here, uh, the way to make it realistic is to use the correct attire. So this is a summer setting, then people should not be wearing jackets. And then the positioning, look at where everyone's facing. They're facing at the singer or the performer, and then the demographic. So this one was set in Bosnia. So generally the people are white. Pero if we're doing for Philippine setting, let's try to use Filipinos as our human entourage. So it may sound like complicated and all, and it's hassle to find the right entourage. That's okay. So the key is to be efficient. Every time you do this post process, start saving the people that you use and keep them in a folder so that you don't have to keep searching online. You already have this library, which I'll show you. I have one. So it really takes me a few seconds just to find the right person for the right perspective. And then next we have smoke effects. So in doing perspectives, it's not that visible, but you'll notice how smoke, fog convey even more depth. Yeah, that's something you should practice. The farther the object is, the more foggy it is. Even if that's Metro Manila, whether that's Metro Manila, Baguio, Tagaytay, wherever, there'll always be fog. So make sure na you have to understand that when an object is farther away, it's more hazy. And then next is plants. Although when I rendered this, I already have model plants. But again, if your PC can't handle uh, your hardware cannot handle that many objects in the scene, it's okay to Photoshop the plants, which I'll also demonstrate later. So yeah, I think that's what do I have more? Yeah, that's basically it for the concepts of post-processing. So now I'm gonna demo the scenes that Sir Chris made earlier. So let me end the share screen first. Okay, hi guys. So can you see my Photoshop screen? All clear one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this was the one earlier with a slightly different angle. So this was sent to me. So I already, if you look here, I already put the layer so that we have a faster workflow. Pero I'll demo each one. Pero for those who don't use Photoshop, just watch pa rin how the concept of everything plays out. So even if you don't know how to use Photoshop, you'll still learn from this. But for those who know basic Photoshop, then good, you can follow along. Pero sige, let's start first with the basic tools. So first is this layer one. That's always the main image. So just slide it to Photoshop, and then here it is. So this is the raw, unrendered image that Sir Chris made. So that's straight from Enscape. So here are some commands you should know first. This circle here opens this. So you have various tools here, which I'll demonstrate later. But just always remember to click this one when there's a certain command you need. And then this one here, the one is a layer mask. So the layer mask, which I'll explain later, pero what it generally does is it can hide what's not selected, and so you'll see where it comes in handy. And here naman in the toolbar, so some important tools. So the rectangular tool for selection, arrows for moving things around, and then magic wand. So that one is to select based on the colors, to make a selection based on the color. So something like this. And then you have, yeah, the other tools are not important naman, pero I'm only gonna demonstrate the important tools. The next is brush, so one of the most important tools. So brush is literally what it's like it's like a paintbrush. Pero there are different, so many kinds of paint brushes, which I will demonstrate the essentials. And then next you have the eraser. So very self-explanatory. It erases the paintbrush or other elements. And then what else? Yeah, generally those are the ones you use lalo na for post-processing. So, but what's very important to post-processing is managing the layers. Kasi ako, I'm sanay na. So I generally don't group anymore. But I'll teach you how to group your layers and how to manage them well. Kasi nga, you'll get lost with the number of items. Like this is a super simple scene, pero if I open these groups, you can see how many layers are ready. So can you imagine those design competition renders, how many layers those had? I counted before, it had like around 700 layers. So it took me around a day to post process it. And that's generally my philosophy. I'd rather have how do you say this? Like three super good renders that tell a perfect story than so many that, are vague. Hello, sorry, I got disconnected. You can hear me again?
Yes, sir. We can hear you now.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Sorry, got disconnected. Okay. Here. Sorry, what was the last thing I was saying before it got disconnected? Well, anyway, I think the last thing I was saying was about the layers. So the first thing I would do is the first thing I would do is put the sky first. Because you know that dictates the mood already. So since the file circuit set is already a PNG and there's no sky, it means that thing is transparent already. So what I would do is let's see first how it looks correctly. So I have this mountain scene here. Diba? It, of course you can replace it with whatever you like. So let's see how it was done. So if I usually have an assets folder complete already. Can you guys see my assets folder or it only shows the Photoshop?
We can see the Photoshop.
Only. So wait, let me change what I'm share screen. Now you can see this one.
There.
Okay. So to be efficient, which is for my students who know I'm really after efficiency. It's nice to have your workflow set up already. So look at this. I already have all the assets ready. I even have another folder for the assets I'm going to use for this project. So here, look at this. So here, let's use this background. Let's just place it there. And then drag it below the layer one. So layer one will always be the main image. So right click, rasterize. And then this is a tool to select that entire layer. So press control and click plus on the image of the layer. So there, right click, free transform, and then just hold shift to scale correctly. And then there, now it fits perfectly. Pero here's what to do to, now you have this part that's not yet been touched. Now, here's a technique. Control C, Control V, slide it here. There's a little portion missed out, so you can just adjust a bit. Make sure the two overlap. Look at that, the two layers. Make sure they overlap. Then just find the right angle. Let's say like this. Yeah. And then look, click on the layer that's above. Get your eraser. The opacity, bring it down. And then just start erasing. So here's what's crucial there. Let's see that again now. Compare it with a hard brush with maximum opacity. It creates that line. It doesn't blend smoothly. So what you really need to do is use soft brush and then lower the opacity. So it creates a smoother, no seam lines, much smooth. Then since now that it fits perfectly, merge down. Now you have one whole layer. Then we drag it below here. So now what I use is now something just seems off, right? It looks like it was in Photoshop lang talaga. So now I apply these. Now it blends perfectly. So what are these? So what I always use are these three commands. So this one again, here, I always use this. Brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, and color balance. Those three. So when it's background, lalo na during daytime, it's always brighter. Remember that, brighter and less amount of contrast because of the fog and all of that. So yeah. And then next is click this one, hue and saturation. Also, when the image is farther, it's also more saturated. And color balance, I usually put these since to make it more realistic, I put them on the yellowish side, more red. Since it's daylight, it's naturally orange or warm. So there. Suddenly it blends better in the background. And then one final trick. So let's delete these. One final trick is to add a blur. So we go to filter, and then add the blur. Wait, sorry. Filter, Gaussian blur. And then you just adjust how much blur you need. So not too much, but just a touch enough to show that that it's way behind there. Now that's why I have these layers here. In case you think you need to adjust a bit, you just click and then play around. There, looks better. And so now next. So now that we have a complete image as it is, now I have the master controls for the entire image. So again, it's these three: brightness, hue, saturation, color balance. So these are the layers that I put on the topmost of the image. So look at the difference with those three. Again, I make it more warm. I reduce the saturation to make it less cartoonish. So there, it becomes more and more realistic. So how did this happen again? Just that and then present. That brightness contrast, hue saturation, color balance. So after this tutorial, now that you know those three, you can also play around with the other commands eventually as you get more sanay. So for those who don't use Photoshop, these things show up in every photo editing software. Kaya what you guys can learn are just basically the concepts of how to make the image more realistic. Then my next touch, as mentioned in my details, when I say details, I add some fog always. Kasi nga, it adds that depth of realism. Since without it, it still looks kind of flat. But if you add it, it adds that misty vibe na, which in real life, or when you take pictures, that really shows up in real life. Then next, what do I have here? Let's see. Okay. So I'm sure what's important for everyone is adding people. So these are my entourage. There. So I'm sure everyone's wondering how do you put people realistically and how do you add shadows realistically also? So let's start with that. So in my boy layer, so let's delete everything. Hide this first. So with my assets, I just drag there again. So this is where the composition comes in. So get the right scale first. I usually use I use the structure, lalo na doors, or something that gives me a sense of human scale. So like that, and then drag into place, and then just so it takes a lot of practice and trial and error to get the correct scale. There, so there, that's my there. So next, what do I do? So drag in the boy layer first. So what I want to do is I want to make sure he matches the perspective correctly. So again, the command control and click. So now just that layer is selected. And then I click this again, brightness contrast. So generally entourage in the image will always be darker. Kasi nga usually the sun is behind your subject. So I usually lower the brightness. Contrast, I also move back kasi again, the camera is quite far. So you have to move it back. Now it looks like he's blending in. Now, how do we do shadows? So again, control and click on the layer, then control C and V, rename this one to shadow. Now the shadow is always below the main layer of your subject. So what you do is we have to take note first, where are the shadows? So the shadows are like this, are, uh, are going in this direction. So I rotate it this way, basically following with the direction of the shadows, and then just adjust there. So make sure that the bottom of the shadow or the endmost touch the feet or edge of the object. So it's touching, like it can be like that. Now this takes a little more effort because of the ball. So watch this. So I select the ball and then drag it there. So make sure everything's touching. And then what we do next is, so go to image, adjustments. So if you notice, this is exactly the same as this, but the only difference is it edits the layer directly. It doesn't create a new layer of adjustments. So this one, since it's a shadow, generally what you do is go straight and make it black. So something like this. And then here, no, that's too dark. What you want to do is eyeball this, make it match the shadows and the surroundings. So what you do is here, opacity, and just bring it down. See which one matches. And then you can also add a blur there so that it follows the movement. It looks a lot more dynamic. So when you zoom out, there's a shadow. Now, if the shadow looks slightly too big, there, that's when you can adjust. There, you can stretch it also to be more realistic. There, see, now the shadow looks perfect. There, just make slight tweaks to it till it looks correct. There. So now at least you have everything in a layer. It's neat. So if you select it, it moves as one. So now let's add the next person. So here I made a mistake with the shadow actually. So it's the same process. But here, since I made a mistake with the shadow earlier, it's easy. Just select the layer of the shadow, right click. So let's see that. So this is the tool I used, rectangular, or you can do again the control and then click. So you're selecting on the shadow, make sure that rectangle is showing, right click, free transform, right click again, flip horizontal. So now it's in a correct position. Then apply. And then let's zoom in, make sure that it attaches to the feet correctly. There. And then just trim off the excess. No, wait, should be a little more. So that's where the trial and error comes in. It has to somehow align perfectly, but you can get away with instances like that. It doesn't align perfectly, so you just have to start erasing what you think is not needed. So there's something like there. Of course, it will never be perfect, but from the one glance, it kind of looks correct already. And then, so yeah, that's how to add the second person. So again, same brightness, contrast, compared with and without. This one just fits the image better. So there, now we have two. Then the next thing I do is, since these are your subjects, so they're positioned along the rule of thirds. Like the rule of thirds would be somewhere here, and then somewhere here. So look where your eyes are drawn, to the people, to the activity, and then to the architecture itself. And then look at the, if horizontally you have this, and then two-thirds is the background. So it already tells a story. It sets the mood, it sets the vibe of the place. So that's something you should always take note of. And then and Sir Chris knows this now. Whenever I do my perspectives, I like exaggerating things. So I really like the perspectives being exciting. So I usually add stuff like random leaves falling, random dirt. It doesn't like do much in one glance, pero as a whole, it adds so much more character to the perspectives. So how do you do that? So in your leaves layer, here I have some random leaves. So when you download something, just save it always and always type PNG so that it's already cut out like this. So here, just put it in place, then right click, rasterize, and then go straight to editing it. Bring down the saturation or just choose the colors that you think work. So bring that down, not too much. And then in color balance, just make it on the green side. There, it's on the green side. So let's slide it in the leaves layer. So here's a new command that I'll show you. For those who use Photoshop, but if you don't just understand the concept of how I apply them. First, what I do is, so I have that layer, I blur it so that it shows there's movement. And then press the Alt button. So in your keyboard, press Alt and then click and then drag. So that's Alt, click, and drag. So it makes multiple copies without pressing Control C, Control V. And then you can start lowering the opacity so that it blends better. But now your scene looks more dynamic with so much more going on. So there, you see that. So there's depth and variety. And then you can slide it around depending on where you think. So the key is not too much, just the right amount always. So there, compare it with and without. It makes it more dramatic. And then next, this one. This is an interesting one. Since the goal of post-processing is to make things more realistic, look at that. Compare the house. Sir Chris was teaching bump map and those other techniques to make the materials more realistic. I do something that makes it even more realistic, and it's to add dirt. Kasi diba in real life, there's no perfectly clean structure. So what I do is I already have this dirt image. So a dirt PNG, slide it on, and then shift and then drag to get the correct scale. Then right click, rasterize, and then I just slide it in my dirt layer. And then here's the where things get interesting because there's that white part. You want to get rid of that. So in Photoshop, there's a tool, this thing here. That's called blending options. So what it does is it dictates how it's applied, how that layer applies to the rest of the project. So it looks overwhelming. But when you see a white something, automatically press multiply and it eliminates the white background. So there, it already shows up. Then lower the opacity so it's not too dirty naman. You just want to have that touch, very, very subtle touch that makes a big difference if you look at it in totality. So there. So let's compare the difference. Diba? This one looks slightly cartoonish. When you add it, it adds a depth, certain realism to it. So those are some secrets na very quick to do. You don't need to stress over it when you're doing the render process in Enscape. Pero doing it in Photoshop does it in seconds. And then lastly, now, Sir Chris used a lot of plants here. That's fine. So if you're able to do that, go for it. Pero there will be times na the PC can't handle it. So no matter how nice the PC is, SketchUp's plants are really heavy. So lalo na when you're trying to render it also. Kaya here's my plants layer. So usually I also have a collection of plants and it's very simple to apply. So here's a technique of making the image look even more filled up. So I click here. So I download PNG shrubs. Then we just drag in place. Then usually it's nice putting shrubs in the foreground like this. Because it already, it like, what you're trying to avoid is that cut there. It makes the image look more bold. So there, right click, rasterize. And then remember the command, alt, click, and drag. So now you can have multiple. And then the technique, so it doesn't have that line there, drag below. So there, it blends perfectly. And then you'd want to have one on the other side as well to prevent that, to make it look more complete. There. So it looks like you have a perfectly framed image with shrubs. Then next is, what if you want to add, let's say, add even more trees? It's hard to appreciate now because the scene already has a lot of plants. Pero, pero how do we drag and drop? So like this only. So from your asset, get just get any random plant you have. So here we drag and drop and just shift and drag to get the correct scale. Then put it in the right position. Let's say you want it here, there. And then just adjust accordingly. So usually you need to make them a little more on the yellowish side because it's daytime. Pero there, that's how it would blend perfectly. And then here, I want to show another example where to make it more realistic. So let's put another one. So since it's farther, it becomes smaller. So shift, adjust. So again, for those who don't use Photoshop, the, it's more of the concepts now of how to compose and how to make it more realistic. So of course, your software will have a different command. Just apply the concept and the techniques. So this one, we're trying to avoid that, right? It looks flat on the grass. So what you do is you get your eraser and then lower the opacity and then just slightly, just add some erase slightly so that it blends better. And then since now it kind of blends with the background, we can adjust the brightness and contrast so that it will be more visible there. So yeah, we tackled all layers for this exterior scene. So the next I'll demonstrate is interior naman. Pero let's recap everything. Lalo na starting with the difference. Look within without fog. It adds that level of depth. The next, the dirt, the trees blocking it. Pero you can see it adds some kind of realism to it. Then the leaves, and then the people, and then the background. So yeah, that's how to do an exterior scene. And generally, doing exterior scenes is much faster and more exciting because the changes are it's less detailed. You make a few mistakes, you can get away with it. Now the interior naman is a little bit more technical now because it's so focused inside. So let's take a look. This is kind of halos the same scene that Sir Chris made earlier. Pero here, this is raw also, untouched. Pero now let's put all the layers. Then let's see the difference it makes. So there. In interior, there's two things na I want to show you na wala sa exterior. And it's one is the lights and one is people, lalo na when they intersect with furniture. And yeah, I think like it does. Yeah, mostly lighting like TV, the lighting fixtures. So That's something people make a mistake a lot in doing, and then it turns really unrealistic. So let's break down everything again. So without the background, since this was a PNG already, it's easy to slide an image at the back. So this one is, so let's take a look. But there's a slight difference. So let's use this background. So try to get the scale correct, usually like that. Now, remember when you're inside, it's usually darker inside than outside, lalo na during daytime. So the important thing here is you have to adjust the brightness to maximum, contrast to minimum. Because nga, di ba, when things are farther away, contrast is always, look at the difference. It's so much more less. It's more hazy. So you might even have to do it twice. So adjust the brightness again. There. Then what's next? You have to adjust the hue and saturation. Since also when things are farther, it's less saturated. So it's something like that. And also generally it's more blurred. So what I do is this. I create another layer here that's pure white. So it represents pure light. And then that's the regular image. And then I just lower the opacity. So it looks like even more light is coming in, which is exactly the whole point of interiors. You want your windows to show how much light is entering your building. So that's for the background layer. Once you're good with that, that's when we start with, let's off everything first. So there. So now that you have a complete image again, now we do the master controls of everything. So activating everything, it looks like this. So from here pa lang, you can already adjust whether you want to uh, adjust the contrast. It's up to you. Kasi in the end, you develop your own style and own color schemes. So ako, I take the very realistic and more of DC-like. I'm not a Marvel yung colorful. So I like mine medyo desaturated and contrast depending on the situation. Pero since I want a clean interior look, I reduce contrast to maximum. Tsaka it's generally dark. So I'd want to balance out the light. So you can make it brighter or less. So depending. So hue and saturation. So as I said earlier, I usually bring down the saturation a bit. And then color balance, I like, sorry, there. I like putting things on the reddish yellow side, unless I'm creating a mood now of a sad mood. But generally, since it's daylight, I want things on the yellowish, warmer side. So like that. There's the difference without it. So let's start muna. So the person. So just like earlier, it's another slide in place. Pero this is where things get a little more tricky, a little more effort. Kasi nga, the thing with interiors is they have furniture. So your person has to get in there and interact with the furniture perfectly. So let's see how that works. So delete. So here's the person that I will use. So I slide into place. So what I do is right click, flip horizontal. So she's facing the other way. Hold shift, drag to the correct scale. So here, another trial and error thing. Since we don't know exactly where the cushion is, you have to find a way to guess which is the right position. So you have to make adjustments to get the scale correct. So a little big. It's tricky at first. It takes a lot of practice. So there, I think this is the correct. Little down there. Now here's the technique. Let's zoom in. So I'll drag this in the girl layer, right click, rasterize. So now this is where the masking tool I was showing you earlier comes in. So what you want to do is we're going to select the furniture, select the parts that are not that are blocking your human entourage. So we'll select this portion. So there, that part, whatever is in that space, hindi kita. So what you do is look, watch this. If I press this now, it the selection will only keep what's within the selection. So the technique is to press Control Shift. So that's Shift, Control, and I, letter I. So Shift, Control, and I to invert the selection. So whatever is within the reverse of it is what's gonna appear. So if I click the masking, now it's like this. Then here's another trick. So now, if I click on it, something's still off. If I want to move the person around, it still doesn't stick properly. So what you do is unclick this locking tool. Now the layer moves independently. So now that's exactly what the masking tool is supposed to be doing. So make sure this is unchecked. Click on the so look, you can select this. This one moves the mask around. So make sure that it's the main layer that's selected. So there, you can make slight tweaks to get the correct position. So now that's good. Now, how do we make corrections to the person? So there's two ways. Again, it goes straight here, image adjustments there. So when it's interior, usually it's darker. But what do I do if I want to edit it using controls using the layer? So look at this. Control, click, then I press the layer. Then I press, let's say, brightness contrast. Look what happens though. The mask doesn't follow. So what you have to do is, wait, sorry. So what you have to do is, you already made this layer, so select that. It already knows that it's selecting that layer only. And then you select this. So you select this. So what you do is you select this one, control click, then click on the person, then press delete. Sorry, inverse naman. And then you press delete. You get the concept. So now you're hiding, look at that. You're hiding the portion that you're trying to avoid. So that's why I was saying in interior, it's a bit more technical adding entourage. Pero it takes a lot of practice and muscle memory. Kaya you'll take a while at first. Pero like me, I have my ways now of doing it fast. So there, better to usually make it dark kasi nga the light source is here. What we're seeing has to be darker. So brightness is almost down to zero. Then contrast, just you can tweak it slightly. So there, we're done with one entourage. So generally for interiors, I don't like putting so many people inside because it's already a tight space. So I usually have like one or two at most. So for this, and also just not to be redundant, that's enough. One person's enough. So now to make things more realistic, let's add the TV inside. With like sorry, I mean content on the TV screen. So when I render, it usually has light already and it projects something. Pero let's say you're in a situation you don't have. So how do we do that? So the TV layer, let's delete first. Now this one takes a little bit of practice to do also. So usually what I do is, so I just download, like example, a Netflix background. I just slide it here. Now here's a little tricky. So you have to get the scale correct there. And then let's put it inside the layer. Right click, rasterize. Now select it, and then this is how to get it in the correct perspective. So right click, free transform, perspective. And then you have to drag it until it fits. And then what you can also do is, so now we're selecting that layer. You select the screen. So what tool naman am I using now? It's this one, the polygonal lasso. So I'm selecting the screen only. There, open that, and then again, masking. So make sure this is unchecked. Make sure this is checked. Control and click, and then free transform. So now you just have to slide it perfectly until it fits. So it takes a bit of practice. Usually it takes a few minutes to get it right. Pero, so it's also mastery of the vanishing points. You have to make sure all those lines are aligned. But there, generally it fits already. Then what I do is control, click, and then I add a brightness contrast layer. So what I do is I maximize the brightness and then contrast. Usually when here's where experience comes in. You have to take pictures of, let's say, take pictures of your TV, then see how it reacts. So that's how you get realistic rendering. So usually one brightness contrast is not enough. I add another one. There, starting to look more and more realistic. And then what I do is to create that glow. Here, wait. I click blending options. So on the TV layer, again, right click, blending options, and then I click outer glow. So let's see what it does. So you see what it does. It creates that light coming out. You see it. So again, it's finding the right balance of not too much. So it takes practice, but generally there's that small haze that comes out of the screen. So there it is. So that's how you do your TV. Again, since it's daytime, you have to practice finding the difference between nighttime and daytime, because doing this during the night will look slightly different also. So it's more of practice talaga. And then next is, okay, so usually when I do my perspectives, I already have lighting fixtures. So here, so I just got some light PNGs and then slid them to the ceiling. So this adds so much more realism. Lighting plays a major role even during the daytime. So to create realistic lighting, one thing you should know about lighting is, okay, there's the fixture, pero how do you turn it on? So usually light is pure white, no matter what the color is. So what I do is I have a layer that's pure white. So what I did was I literally just created a new layer, named it light source, and then I start selecting. So like this. Or if you want to speed up, go magic wand tool. Pero okay, so yeah, sometimes it's more efficient to just use the polygonal lasso tool. So there, select everything, then select everything inside the light fixture. You can be more accurate to this. I'm just doing it to speed up the process. And then what we do is you get the paint bucket tool, so this one. Make sure it's pure white, opacity is 100, and then go to your light source layer. Then put that. So from here pa lang, it kind of looks realistic already. It looks like the lights are on. Pero this is what takes it up a notch and makes it even more realistic. You see the haze. So when you take pictures, look at your camera, lalo na when it's hitting the light directly, it creates that lens flare effect. So here's the technique on doing lights. So the thing with light is it actually is it's a bunch of layers and a bunch of it starts with it degrades. So you should have layers. So by now I already have this. I have a collection of brushes here. So I have lens flare brushes. So you just search online how to add brushes to your Photoshop. So here I have some already prepared. So I what I do is I start with the layer first, closest, the brightest layer first. So let's get that. So just to show you what this brush is, look at it at maximum. It's a lens flare. So I reduce the size. Let's make it fit the fixture correctly. So it starts small first because that's directly coming out of the light. And then a little too bright. So adjust the opacity, reduce. It already looks realistic. But I add another layer, put it below. So let's call that the inner layer. And then this one, outer layer. So if you notice how I did my spotlights in the concert hall design, that's the same concept. So now with that one, since the light falls off already, you can start adding color. So now I'm making something warm. Now again, it won't be that noticeable because this is a daytime render. Pero at night, very visible yan. So same position, pero make it larger. Reduce the, no, we'll reduce the opacity sa layer mismo. So there, right? And then just bring it down to like below 50. So look, it's not so noticeable, but look at that. It makes a very slight difference to add to the realism. So now you look, step back and zoom out, see if how it looks. Then just control the overall opacity. So a lot of the post-processing is always about adjusting the opacity to make sure everything is cohesive and it blends well together. And then the final layer that I usually do is again, just add dirt. So where is that? So I showed you how to do dirt earlier using the multiply tool. So here. So compare it with and without. Look, I'm hiding it. It's so subtle, but it makes a difference in realism. Here, if I drag it around, you can see where they are. Look, very subtle, but it adds a depth of realism. Oh wait, I forgot the plant. So here, I also have a plant layer. So adding a plant, let's say something like, where's the plant? Here. It's also similar to adding a person earlier. So so what I'll show is like how to add the shadow. So you have your plant, Control C, Control V to copy. Free, right? Use this, select. Make sure that the layer of the shadow is selected. Slide it under. So let's make that plant shadow. And then right click, free transform, flip vertical. So you can see what you have to understand is where is the shadow coming from. So it's there. And then just adjust there. And then again, same process. Image, hue, saturation, bring it down to almost black. and then let the opacity handle it. And then you can also add a blur to make it blend with the surroundings. To make sure it's touching the bottom. So perfect placement of the shadow. And then here's another technique. If you really are super OC about the shadows, which I usually do, I even add another layer on top. So this one naman is not really a shadow, but it's called shade. So the difference between shadow and shade is generally the darker side when an object is lit. So that's the shade. Shadow is the black thing that the object casts. So so I can put a layer above it, shade, right click. No, sorry, control click the main layer, click on the shade layer, and then I get my soft brush, and then I just paint black with a super low opacity, the one that's closer to the floor. Because the higher it is, the more light. So there, just one touch. Then now suddenly it blends even better. So look at the difference. Adds even more depth. So yeah, basically that's it for interior. A lot of the process of doing post process is doing it all over and over again. Kaya it takes a while. It may seem like tiring at first, pero when you develop the muscle memory, it becomes effortless. Kaya yeah, that's it for interior and exterior scenes. So I hope you learned a lot from this one, and I hope you're able to be efficient with your workflow and apply it also to your art desk. Kasi it really makes a difference. And it also, you won't need to make like 15 renders to make a point. You can simply do 5 perfect ones that tell a super clear and accurate picture of your design intent. So yeah, thank you so much. Here, mrcutout.com. Literally everything you need. So you have plants, people, everything. And all you have to do is just sign in, make an account, then just keep downloading. The free account, there's like a limit on how many you can download a day, but that's enough for you to get started. Tsaka the premium ones in yung magbayad, pero so much free. So that's generally where I get my content.
All right, for the second question, how to use AI render to integrate in Photoshop rendering?
There, I think, Sir Chris.
AI AI render. And what's the question again?
How to use AI render to integrate in Photoshop rendering?
Okay. Well, the thing is, there are so many. Well, you have to start off with which AI render are we talking about? Are we talking about, say, Midjourney? If we're talking about Midjourney, of course, it will just generate an image um, based on the text prompt. Okay. But if you're talking about AI image generation or rendering, say, if I'm not mistaken, SketchUp has how do you say this? An app, built-in app, no, designed by SketchUp Labs, wherein you can create different renders using AI. Okay, so I think it's the same thing, or I think it's the same principle. Just click on it, generate the image, then export it to Photoshop. The same idea, just the way Architect Inigo showed, no, on how to manipulate an image.
Thank you for that, sir. So there's another question. The question here is, Can you add to the Enscape library?
I, I believe so. You can add, although I haven't done it. No? Let me just see first. Let's share screen. Asset. Okay. Okay. If you're gonna look at the asset library, okay, there is what we call custom assets. So basically just need to make sure that the downloaded asset can be read by Enscape.
Um, Thank you for that, sir. So we have one last question. The question is, aside from Photoshop, is there any other similar digital tool that you would recommend to use?
Mm. Honestly, I know there's like Corel
Hmm.
Paint or something, and maybe even Canva to some extent. Uh, what's important is you know the concepts of how to post process, which generally they would have the same. No, they would have similar tools with different names, but you have to know how they work so that you can apply these concepts. But then when you post process,
If
Thank
I
you
may
for
add, if I may
yeah.
add, there's another. This is a free software that I've seen. I haven't used it, but it has a similar interface with Photoshop. It's GIMP. It's
Oh, I hear
GIMP.
about that. Yeah.
So yun, don't need to have any subscription. It's a free app.